I'm so excited to have you with us today, Greg, because you're at the forefront of some really exciting things, and we'll get into a lot of that. But for those who may not necessarily be familiar with you and
Sure.
Pineapple Academy, can you kind of give us a broad overview of what your journey's been like and
Sure.
why you decided it was important for you to start Pineapple Academy?
Sure. Happy to. Thank you for asking. It's great to be here with you, Adam. Thanks.
Thank you.
I guess I really have to start at the beginning. I was a Johnson Wales grad. I got into food and beverage, through that route. Got into hotels and resorts and did a lot of food service management type stuff. I even did a little stint as a chef instructor in the early 90s where I really learned how to deliver curriculum and structure classes and train people. And what's beautiful about that is, most of your audience is in that 18 to 22 year range. So you really understand how to connect with younger people and what they need to learn. So over the years, I've really learned how to interact with folks on a training. I've run many training programs, either as a consultant or as an operator, because I've just always been a training guy. It's like, it's just so important to understand what you're doing. And so I know it sounds kind of Captain Obvious, but unfortunately, we've all been to enough restaurants to know that isn't necessarily what's happening in the real world all the time.
Right. And I think most of us also have the experience of like being tossed a set of keys at the end of the night and said, okay, it's up to you to close the joint down. And you've never been trained to do any of that.
Right. Best story I've heard recently, a guy that works with us, wonderful person. When he was in high school, he was 15 years old and he was working in a restaurant and he was completely knows nothing about anything. And the chef goes, "Hey, I need you to clean and get the shrimp ready for tonight." And hands him a block, remember the frozen 10-pound blocks of shrimp, used to come in, right? And they get, and they have to be, peel and devein, all that kind of stuff, manual stuff. He was in a frozen block. The kid, he's 15 years old. He has no idea. You know what he did? He throws it in the sink, turns on the hot water, and suddenly all the shrimp's pink. So now the chef comes by and the chef goes, "The hell are you doing?" And it's like, what he's doing is exactly what he thinks he needs to do because he doesn't know anything. And you ask a guy to prep an expensive product and he knows nothing about it. But anyway, I digress. But these are the kind of things that happen on a regular basis around the country. So basically, what my journey is, I've been in hotels and resorts. I've done some restaurant work. I've done some franchise work. And again, you just see the same problems over and over with what's going on. And then in 2008, I had really gotten in for several years. I'd really gotten into the development side of things. I was like an owner's rep. I would represent, high net worth people who had investments. And this one particular man I was working for out of Charleston, South Carolina, he had some land in a town called Brevard, North Carolina, up in the mountains, gorgeous mountain town. And he wanted to put a hotel there with a restaurant. So I came, here's Greg. So I've got this lot of land. It's right in the downtown area. And I've got architects and designers, all this thing. So we worked for a year and a half, almost 2 years, designing this thing. And literally, because I was the liaison with the county and the town. And so I literally go in, I end up finally pulling the permit so we could break ground and start this project. Super excited. What happens is we have the 2008 crash.
Right.
So anybody of you out there who was involved in restaurants and hotels back in 2008, we remember the heartburn that occurred at that moment, particularly those of us in the development game. Zero money and everything dries up. And so literally the permit meant nothing at that point. Had a piece of dirt and a permit and it wasn't going to go anywhere. So I started looking at my career and what really kind of lit me up. And I realized that the truth of the matter is I've always been a food guy. That's how I grew up. I'm of Italian descent. I spent my Sundays, every Sunday at my grandma's house, eating amazing food and, experiencing that hospitality, and just feeling that my whole life. And I never thought, I didn't know that nobody else did that either. I just thought that's how everybody lives, right? But you find out later that's not always the case. So I was very fortunate the way I grew up and the way I was exposed to food. And so food was a joyful thing. It was camaraderie, it was family, it was friends, and that's what food has always meant to me. And so I decided to get into healthcare. And so, which is kind of funny because, 35 years earlier, we were laughing at the guys that would go into hospitals.
That's absolutely
Am I right?
Yep.
And no disrespect to anybody at this point, because I have learned it's a very respectful environment that you need to take seriously. It takes a tough operator and somebody who knows what the hell they're doing to be in healthcare. Healthcare is not for sissies. I mean, let's just put it that way. It can be a hard gig, but it's also very rewarding. And it does not have the hours that restaurants and hotels have. It doesn't have the late nights and the crazy weekends. It's a very different structure. But it's very food forward these days. The days of the number 10 cans and the scoop, pudding out of the number 10 cans or the green beans, it's just not what's happening anymore.
That's
and
correct.
So, and I've had the pleasure of being in that movement over the last 15 years, since 2008, to help with that transition. I've done a lot of projects as a consultant in hospitals, moving them from what's called a tray line assembly to hotel style room service.
That's
just
correct.
like I ran in hotels. It literally is no different. There's tons of catering opportunities. There's retail. Hospital cafeterias, these are not cafeterias anymore. These are, like a business and industry accounts. These are action stations. These are, granted, there's a few pockets around the country, where you have the old style hospital food scenario. But for the most part, particularly in the urban areas, these are first class, serveries and bistro, type environments, and the food's fantastic. And it's driven by chefs. And that's the other thing you've seen over the last 15 years. You've seen a lot of top end chefs come into the space. I know guys who have won huge ACF, awards. I know a guy right now in North Carolina who heads up a healthcare system in Raleigh, North Carolina, who was voted the #1 chef in North Carolina.
Right.
Not a healthcare chef, just the #1 chef in North Carolina. A guy named Ryan Conklin. So it's sort of like, he's a CIA guy, by the way. So these people have found their places in healthcare and realize there's a huge opportunity there. And it's just as diverse as as hotels or restaurants. Like I said, you have doctors' lounges, you have catering, you have retail, you have patient services, you have just a lot of food service opportunities. Working with a foundation, I've been in hospital foundation events where we're doing in big tents, like super high end, fundraising events, like I used to do in the hotel business. So there's a lot of things that are similar, but the differences are very clear. The hours of operation, it's not alcohol forward type environments. It's definitely a more controlled environment. And there's obviously other layers of regulations above even the FDA food regs. There's even tougher standards because of what you have to do to take care of patients.
That's correct.
The clinical side of it. So it's an interesting world. I've gotten to know it very well. And then, of course, that brings in senior living. I've done a lot of projects, everything from skilled nursing to independent living. Some of my clients are some of the biggest senior living clients in the United States. Their properties look like resorts.
That's
they're
correct.
Gorgeous, right? A friend of mine, Eric Eisenberg, incredible culinarian. He runs in Medford, Oregon for Pacific Retirement, just this incredible, what's called a continuing care retirement community or a lifestyle community. Honest to God, Adam, you think you're walking into the Four Seasons. I mean,
Right.
the dining rooms that are there and the opportunities there, the wine service, and they have wine rooms, and they're right in the middle of wine country, right?
Right.
It's just gorgeous. So huge opportunities, for culinarians and food service management people who are looking to get out of the late nights and a lot of the antics, let's face it, that go on. And it's just a different environment. And so I think you find your blood pressure going down. I know mine did.
Sure.
Once you know what's going on, right?
I spent 2 years in a upscale retirement community here in Asheville, and the first time I walked on property, I thought I was in a country club. It's interesting because as the general public have gotten more educated about food, they're the ones that have been driving this change. So all of a sudden, the people who are turning 65 are much more different than the ones who might be 70, 80 years old and have been exposed to something completely different. So it's a fascinating time to be in that particular area.
There's no doubt this is a pivotal moment in this industry, both senior living and hospitals, and let's just face it, food service in general, because of the aging population. I don't know if people really understand the demographic shifts that are happening in this country and how substantial they are. We're talking about, just tens of thousands of people turning 65 and 75 every day. You're talking about in 10 years from now, the number of people over 65 in this country are going to create like this huge opportunity for people. And there's not going to be enough younger people to take care of all of it. And so where does that leave all of us as operators, as investors, as customers? You're really going to start realizing that food service for a long, long time has been very labor driven. It's very hands-on type stuff. It takes there's a lot of tasks involved. So the issue is, how do we incorporate technology to reduce our FTE load and create kitchens that can put out high quality food without having to go through every single process to get the food ready? Now, granted, it started, I think, with lettuce. I mean, we used to start, what was that, 15, 20 years ago, we could start buying bags of, spinach and lettuce, that kind of stuff. Ready to use, RTU, right? And there was nothing wrong with it. It was clean, it was nice, it was good products. And they've only gotten better. I mean, my God, I have a friend that works for a lettuce company out of Massachusetts, and she is a registered dietitian, and her job is to make is quality control. And this product coming out, and it's absolutely beautiful, greens that these companies, and it's all in controlled environments. You're going to see that everywhere. It's going to be fish. We're already seeing all these things emerging. And so what's going to end up happening is we're going to have to start bringing in product that's already sliced and diced and ready to go. It doesn't mean that we're going to buy Stouffer's lasagna. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love scratch cooking, but we all have to get real with what's happening with labor. It's like, if you don't have that guy to do your P&D shrimp, then gosh, you're going to have to buy P&D shrimp, whether it's cooked or raw.
That's correct.
Because there's nobody to do the work.
Right.
So we just have to get real about it.
It's the conundrum of, people requiring a higher quality of food and yet not having the hands on deck in order to produce it. So I remember, getting boxes of already cut mirepoix, and I looked at that, and I was, in a previous time of my life, I would have been like, that's crazy. That's bullshit. Yeah. Get a dishwasher over here with a knife.
Right.
But the reality is that labor shortage exists across the entire system. So that means I probably don't have a dishwasher who's available.
That's right. Or the kid didn't show up at all.
Right. Exactly. And the more that I think it's probably started with sous vide. And once I started understanding more and more about what that was about, I found out that there was a restaurant in France that was basically a full sous vide restaurant, which consisted of, a boiling pot of water and 2 cooks with scissors. Yet it was one of the most popular places because the food was always consistently great.
I tell you, sous vide is just fantastic.
Yep.
I mean, Kaiser Permanente on the West Coast of California. I mean, all the hospitals in the greater San Francisco area, sous vide. All the proteins are sous vide. And now you'll be able to buy sous vide products from manufacturers. You don't even have to do it yourself. So you could end up with systems, particularly if you get really digital and you really take advantage and leverage technology. You can be shrinking your labor footprint by a third as long as you understand that your food cost is going to go up.
Sure.
But your overall overhead is going to actually end up being lower. You're going to have less waste. You're going to be throwing away less boxes. You're going to be doing, the ripple effect of where this is all going financially just makes a lot of sense. And what we're seeing now is, because we have partnerships with, US Foods and Gordon's Foodservice and other people, there's a lot of people coming into this space with prepared foods.
Right.
And it's amazing.
To pivot a little bit, because it seems to me that one of the things that our industry or our craft forgot along the way is, in the olden days, if you wanted to be a chef, you had to apprentice yourself to a chef and peel potatoes for a year or whatever that horror story was.
Right.
And then with the advent of for-profit culinary schools in the 80s, and them selling the pipe dream as evidenced on the Food Network, which was coming online at the same time. Now all of a sudden you've got a steady influx of, to the degree in which they're trained properly can be argued. But the fact of the matter is that, typically folks who had been involved in the industry before going into culinary school ended up being a lot more agile than, say, someone who came in there. But I think the industry just kind of sat back on its heels and said, great, we don't have to train anymore. And so
you nailed it on the head.
And so that kind of went by the way. It was like we forgot that was job one as a chef, as a teacher and a mentor, and also, as a model of a mature professionalism for these young people who are coming in and have these visions of their type of cuisine and what they wanted to achieve in the industry. So for me, it seemed like there was always a gap between the available workforce and the skill level that they needed to be able to do their job appropriately. And the question is like, I don't have time to train.
That's right.
Because everybody's at the same time got really, really tight. It seemed to me that was more the advent of the entrepreneur as opposed to the traditional hotelier or hospitality professional, where, that whole idea about hospitality kind of went out the door. And now it becomes a mechanical transaction between I'm preparing this, I get this, and, you provide this in return, and we're done and moving on. So when was it that you, like I read on your website that, I was founded by 2 friends with a common belief that enough is enough when it came to accepting levels of turnover in the food service industry. The average turnover in the food service industry is 30% higher than the average of all other industries. And there are some systems that are now achieving 150% turnover. Which to me is just mind-boggling, which means, half your staff is turning over every 3 months. And so if you didn't have time to train before, you probably have less time to train now. And yet you're just barely keeping your head above the water, which is why I think there's a movement afoot now between some very well-known chefs who are, tapping out of Main Street, and they're like, nope, I'm out of here. This is just, between the shutdown and then the great reopen, when everybody rushed in thinking that it was business as normal. Meanwhile, we're standing in the back going, hey, we lost a third of our staff, and that's why we have to close down a portion of our dining room. There were some folks that didn't understand that nor appreciate that. Not that they needed to, but when was it apparent to you that, like, this whole training thing, man, has got to be something that we need to jump on?
So about 10 years ago, I was sharing with you, I would go around the country doing training programs. And so, I'd actually be on site and work with a lot of great people, well-intentioned people. And so, thank God they were there. But unfortunately, what you see is what I would call the blind leading the blind leading the blind, which means you have ownership that really never got trained in hospitality and food service. You have managers in these operations who may have never worked anywhere except that location or that process. So their knowledge of food service is very limited. And then you got these employees. So there's no transfer of knowledge about as the subject of food service and really understanding what it takes, right down to how to take the trash out. I mean, there's technique for everything, right?
Sure, absolutely.
And so what you see as you travel around the country and you're working these operations, you basically see the same situation over and over and over again. And you realize that there's no way that there's going to be enough trainers to go out there into the world to train everybody to where they need to get to. So, we don't all end up with intestinal diseases because of the food we're eating in our restaurants and food service outlets. I mean, that's kind of where it's gotten, right?
Yep.
And so you realize that the other thing you recognize, and it kind of came to me because I started gravitating towards, YouTube. I find myself, hey, I want to build a pergola in my backyard or a fire pit or whatever. And suddenly here I am, I'm on YouTube and I'm a lot older than your typical tech guy. And I'm using training videos to train myself. Sure. Same thing with my business partner. And so suddenly we're just going, the only way to scale training is to go online. Now, granted, a lot of purists out there are going to go, "Oh, Greg, you can't train people virtually. If it's culinary, you got to be right there." I don't disagree. I'm not going to sit here and try to make the case that online is the only methodology to train people. But let me tell you something. The one thing about kids today, the one thing they understand is this thing right here.
Oh, you know it, baby. You know it.
So we're, rather than fight that and make it their problem, the way they were raised or the way they look at the world, just because that's not the world we grew up in, we have to appreciate and understand that's where they're at. We're trying to meet people where they're at. I don't, it doesn't matter to me. It's like, I just want to give you the information. And it's like, and so we've figured out a way how to distill this thing down to the point where, we're calling ourselves the TikTok of training, basically. And so the whole idea is that we want to give these team members the ability to watch someone actually demonstrate and explain something, give them the why, rather than having to keep going to the chef, going to the managers, going to their coworkers, go, hey, how do I do this? Right down to how to turn on a piece of equipment. Right. I mean, dude, do you know how many people don't even know how to turn on a piece of equipment? I mean, I have a client that did a video last month to teach. So he uses those robots that go back and forth in the dining room for busing and food running. Sure. Which is kind of cool. They don't even know how to turn the stupid thing on. So it's like he had to make a training video just so that they would stop asking him how to turn it on. Well, and the great thing I think, or the appealing thing to me, is that these videos can be consumed anytime. Anytime, right in the workflow. Because you're actually making use of something that I think is a huge trend now, and I don't hear more about, which is this idea of micro training. Yes, so dig into that a little bit for us. That's right. So micro training is very interesting, and so I think when I say this, most people are like, "Yeah, that's totally true. I always knew that, but you just didn't really frame it." Sure. There's a ton of studies out there about this. If you watch short videos of 5 minutes or less, 5 or 6 minutes or less, your retention level is very high. It's like 80%. If you go read a book or you're sitting at a computer for hours doing training courses or whatever, your retention drops dramatically, maybe down to 20%. It's just, and there's tons of studies on this stuff. So the whole premise of micro training, again, is short bursts of information, which is exactly the way people are now, when they're on social media and looking at things, are getting their information, whether it be news, whatever, how cats want to play. I mean, whatever they're looking at on their phones and devices, this is how we're getting our information these days. And so we have to understand that. So as an example, let's take first day on the job. So we've all had that first day on the job, right? Well, the thing that we have lost perspective on in this business is what a crazy environment it is to walk in, not knowing food service or commercial kitchen, and walking into it on day one and realizing, like, I don't know shit. Excuse my French. I don't know anything about this thing.
No.
This is a foreign thing here.
We actually like cursing on this show.
We like cursing.
Well, it's how to grab somebody's attention, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
a well-placed curse word can snap somebody out of reverie. And it reminds me of the fact that, the reason that TED Talks are 18 minutes is because they've discovered that that's about the length of human attention.
That's exactly
like
right.
Anything after 18 minutes is like, oh, okay, whatever, man. I'm lost on the concept now.
Right.
So this idea of short consumable videos is fantastic. And so do you partner with, say, owners and operators, or are you partnering with individual, like, is it a mom and pop shop? Is it like, what are the qualifications for somebody to actually bring in this particular type of educational environment?
So, in the software world, in the tech world, we're called a business to business, a B2B business. And so pretty much all of our clients are what we call enterprise, which means, they have anywhere between, 25 to 800 locations and beyond. And so that's where things get really effective for operations, is when they're scaling it on a big way. We don't go and go try to find, like, as you said, the mom and pops. We certainly can accommodate the mom and pops. But at the end of the day, we are, think about franchises and chain restaurants where you need that consistency throughout the country. Think about, really anybody. I mean, granted, even a mom and pop has to be consistent and, use preventative maintenance and take care of their stuff and all that. So I'm not discounting that at all. But the good news for them, as well as everybody else, is, to answer your other questions, we do have an inventory of videos that we've already built with what I call the fundamentals: hand washing, knife skills, how to clean. We have videos on how to clean everything from the dumpster to the dining room, every surface, how to clean and sanitize. We leave nothing, we assume nothing. We assume you know nothing. And we create gradient education so that one video builds on the other. So by the time you get to the other end, you've seen the whole thing. And so, again, we're trying to take the mystery out of what it takes. And we're also trying to help managers and owners really reinvent on-the-job training in a digital fashion. We're like the modern version of on-the-job training. The difference between traditional on-the-job training versus what we're doing, ours is digital. So it's the same message every single time. It's the same nomenclature every single time. It's consistent and it's easy to access, simple to use. And now the managers aren't getting pulled out of their offices or off their tasks to answer the most basic of questions. So it's really important that, again, we understand that people are coming into our food service world with zero experience and sometimes zero life skills. I mean, you and I grew up in an environment where our parents, our grandparents, our friends, the jobs we were on, people paid attention, they trained us, and that's how we learned, and we had that balance of all those things. That's just not the case anymore. And so we have to understand that. I mean, this sounds silly, but we literally have like some life skills type thing videos available too, just because we know that not everybody gets the benefit of learning those things at home or in school anymore. So they have to know it for the workplace. They have to know that business casual does not mean coming in to work with a torn t-shirt or torn jeans and look like, somebody on the streets. I mean, they just can't. It's just business. That's just not hospitality. That's just not what we've been trying to convey for the last 100 years in hospitality. But they don't know that, and nobody's there to teach them that. The other thing I would say about on-the-job training is, how many times have you had on-the-job training and the trainer literally had a full-time job at that moment because they're a server or they're a cook and they're in the weeds, or maybe they come in, they're not in a good mood or whatever. So the message is different every time that trainer talks to the new guy, right?
Yep.
It's a different, he might be getting some different, oh, I showed you how to do that. Well, no, you didn't even show me how to turn it on. It's like, it's like, so it's inconsistent. And so unfortunately that is the case. And so again, we're trying to give people on the job training, like I said, the TikTok for training and make it real simple. But more importantly, back to the mom and pop example, the ability, we're going to show people how to film your own training videos with your own iPhone.
Oh, that's great.
And I mean, I'm telling you, and you're going to be able to, we're going to have an authoring tool where you can upload your own videos. So you can have a blended, a little bit of sprinkle of pineapple videos. Like there's no reason for you to have a hand washing video. I already have all that stuff. You don't need knife skills. I have all that. But what you do as an operator, and now you do your own brand standards.
Correct.
So now let's make, Adam's lasagna. Okay. Maybe Pineapple Academy gives you the method of preparation and you learn the techniques of cooking, which is all valid, but it's not, our meatloaf might not be your meatloaf recipe, but our meatloaf recipe, video would certainly show you the method of preparation and what you need to do to set up and do it, but it's not Adam's meatloaf. And so you would need to shoot your own video and show them, and again, if you do it right, and there's lots of examples on YouTube, and we're going to have lots of examples how to do an entire meatloaf in like less than 2 minutes. I mean, you don't need to show them how to slice and dice the onions and all that kind of stuff. Guys, there's other videos for that. You just want to show them how to assemble that product with all your mise en place ready to go, what that station looks like, all the ingredients that are there. You give them the ingredients list, and then you have an MOP, and then you just demo the MOP and you put it together and show them. And the last little picture is that the product's done and it's on a plate and how to present it.
So
90 seconds, boom.
I hear that you're doing a lot of technical videos, and I'm just curious at what point in this kind of building of skills do you actually, are there any videos that attempt to explain or to model what hospitality looks like?
Great question. Yes. So we have some customer service. We have some dining room basics. We have, barista basics. We have a lot of things, and it talks, bartender basics. Again, it's about even housekeeping, like, how to present yourself. What is your company's brand? We're all brand ambassadors, whether we like it or not, or whether if you work for somebody, guess what? You are a brand ambassador. If you're a frontline employee, whether you're the cleaner in the lobby or the line cook or the server in the dining room, you represent that brand, and that's part of the gig. And so, yes, we touch on that. But we also have other partners that we're working with who are creating even more curriculum around that. We're about to launch a course. It's called Heroic Hospitality. It's done by another company, but we're hosting it and we're marketing it, and we're going to be launching that here very shortly. And it's done by a top hospitality consulting group that's all they do is train people. So, and whether you're a hotel or retail or restaurants, it's all applicable to you. But it doesn't mean that you can't shoot your own. It doesn't mean, again, in the next, 60 to 90 days with the development that we're working on right now, you're going to be able to have your own blend, and you can curate using your own stuff, third-party stuff, pineapple stuff, whatever. And so the whole idea is to make this to a point where it'll feel like a custom program because it's brand specific. And as a matter of fact, by next year, you're going to be able to put your own logo on the platform. And so we could even, image it in your colors, in your logo,
And do you partner with other technology companies? Because I'm thinking of a couple of full service back of the house solutions specific to senior living and hospitals, which they do everything from inventory to recipes and da 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 da. So I'm just curious, are you being approached by other are you approaching other technology companies saying, hey, this would be a wonderful adjunct to what you're already using?
So I'll give you an example, like right now that's happening. We're in the middle of right now. It's kind of getting off the ground. So one of our senior living community companies is based out of Los Angeles. And they're using our product for training. Matt Perez is the head of dining for that company, an amazing operator. Again, hospitality guy, came to senior living. Okay, so really, drinks the Kool-Aid, he gets it.
Yep.
And he's using a digital checklist. And so what we're working on, because of this new technology, we're going to be able to have what are called embeddable links. What's unique about what we do versus, say, embedding a YouTube video or a Vimeo video, number one, our stuff is all in a safe database.
Correct.
So it is not social media. It will go through firewalls because that's how we built it. I mean, we're in government facilities. We're in hospitals. I mean, you have to have really safe technology,
certainly,
to interface with them. So what's going to happen is this operator is we're all working in tandem to build a digital checklist experience with embedded videos. So I'll go back to that example of, it's your day to clean the ice machine. Boom. Okay, Adam. Gosh, and you're like, wow, I haven't done that in 2 years. Good. Watch, and it's right in the digital checklist. Watch a video on how to sanitize the ice.
Right. So I just want to pull back a little bit, because we were having this conversation before we got on the show, and you mentioned, that crummy clipboard that everybody carries around, with food dangling off it.
Yes.
Because you used it as a tray to carry your plate over the garbage can and to get your lunch. But so we're all used to having checklists, and the best operations are the ones that are systematized, and the chefs that shun systems because, oh, dude, don't hem me in. Like, I need to be creative and fly free. It's a bunch of horseshit, because at the end of the day, you still need clean bathrooms.
That's right.
And how do you do that? By putting up a checklist, which, will either be adhered to or ignored, depending on our ability to follow up on those delegated tasks.
Right.
And what you're telling me is that there's a company that's actually producing digital checklists that I have on my phone, that not only do I have, like, say, my opening checklist or my opening critical path, but my closing critical path. And I can actually assign those duties to other people on my team.
Yep. You're talking about making people autonomous and accountable. And because what's the one thing we're so used to hearing? Well, I know how to do it, but he doesn't know how to do it.
Right.
I mean, how many times have we heard that over the last, me, in my case, 45 years?
Right.
Oh, I know how to do it, so that's why I always do it. Well, guess what?
Or no one knows how to do it as good as I can do it.
That's the other one, right? My other favorite one is, well, why are you doing it that way? Well, back in 1949, Alice used to be the food service director here, and this is how we do it.
And that's the way she wanted it done.
And that's the way so it never changed. We never even question it. That's the other thing. They don't even question it.
Exactly.
Because they don't know. But anyway, the point is, look, we live in a modern age now. It's just time to advance everything forward. And if the pandemic taught us nothing else, technology is really what's going to make things smoother and easier. Granted, there's technology phobias out there. There's people not comfortable, maybe older adults might not feel as comfortable with some of that technology. But at the end of the day, if you got a 16-year-old who's coming to work for you in your restaurant or your food service operation, they have no back off on technology. You can get them in those systems. And I just had this conversation with a friend of mine yesterday. Her son just started working at a restaurant, and within 3 days, he's on the POS and he's managing it, no problem. He goes, yeah, at first and then I got into it and I realized, oh, I understand how all this works.
Yeah, because he's thinking in ones and zeros.
Yeah, it's like he's done it a million times. It's just different applications. But the beauty of technology these days, they've all learned how to give us the same type of widgets or buttons that we all have become accustomed to using. And so it's easy for them to assimilate into a tech situation, these younger folks. So that's why technology is so important. and to the efficiencies. And the other thing is, because things have gotten so much more complicated and so much more expensive, we really need to create that accountability and make sure we're staying on top of things. And so what's nice about these digital checklist experiences, or Pineapple Academy technology, is you get reports and you can see what's getting done, what's not getting done. Is Adam following his onboarding checklist? Is after 7 days, has he met the criteria? Hey, Adam, on day 7, hey, I noticed, you're not quite there yet. You need some help with something. So again, this isn't about ignoring the staff or saying, hey, over to you. It's nothing to do with me anymore. No, Mr. Manager, no, Mr. Chef. You're just as responsible, if not more today,
without a doubt,
train them. But now you've got an amazing tool. And if you have the same questions that are being asked you over and over again, ask yourself, why am I being asked this all the time?
Right.
Well, maybe my process is not exactly dialed into the point where I don't have to think about this anymore.
Exactly, because it used to be that we would blame the person running the system, not the system itself.
There you go.
The smart operator will pull himself back and remove himself emotionally from the situation and going, is it really the person or is it the system that's screwed up? And if it's the system that's screwed up, how can we actually fix it? Because leaving it up. Okay, so two things jump to mind. First off, thank you for this conversation. It's incredibly engaging. Number one, I think as much bad as COVID was for our industry and the world, I think that there are some hidden benefits to it. Number one, prior to COVID, if you asked a chef to jump on a Zoom call, he wouldn't know what the hell you were talking about.
Right.
So we were forced as a community and as a fraternity to get pulled into the 21st century to recognize that there are tools that exist out there that are just not a POS system. Right. POS system used to be our complete focus and where's our sales mix and all this different kind of stuff. Yet there's more information that can be gathered with systems like this. And it kind of pulled the sheen of respectability off the industry and going like, okay, we lost 6 million jobs. We got about half of those back up until now. Every major hospitality news outlet is talking about, hey, good times are here again. Now we're back to pre-pandemic levels, yet we're still understaffed, which they don't want to talk about. Again, so if we didn't have time back then, we certainly don't have time now, yet we also want to grow our brand and our the opportunity for revenue flow and profit, if only to put that profit back into the business and say, now we want to start offering healthcare or the PTOs or whatever the hell that is.
How about career development? Can we at least agree that career development, you mentioned a word earlier that I wanted to circle back on, apprenticeships.
Yep.
Look, we have apprenticeship programs in the sense that we have learning tracks. And I actually have customers who now are working with the Department of Labor. Do you know that there's monies available from the federal government for chef apprenticeship programs? These are 2-year programs, and you can get reimbursed all your investment, your administrative costs, all that stuff. And suddenly 2 years later, you got a guy who is certified. And I mean, you want to talk about loyalty to a company if you were to do that? I mean, we have to understand that you mentioned this earlier about this for-profit culinary training that happened for so many years. That really created a dark stain, I think, in many ways. Okay. It created an unrealistic expectation.
Yes, sir.
I have interviewed dozens of people coming out of culinary school, and I love to interview them. But the one thing I have found with a lot of these culinary grads, they're coming out of school with 0 work experience.
Correct.
I'm sorry, but a culinary school kitchen experience has nothing to do with what happens in the real world. Sorry, folks, to burst your bubble, but if you've never worked in a restaurant or a commercial kitchen and you're coming out of culinary school and you think you're going to snag some job, guess what? You're going to be a line cook for me. Well, you have nothing to give me except that you know how to use a knife and you know the words and but you've never been tested under fire.
Right. And there's no they're not equipping these students with the tools that they're going to need later on in their career, such as leadership skills,
That's right.
communication skills, relationship building skills,
That's right.
those type of things that become absolutely critical to not only your success, but your operation success and the longevity. But the point I wanted to get to is that coming out of the pandemic, job number one for our industry is to make sure that everybody understands that this is a safe environment for them to come back to. That this is that this is an honorable position, that it's worth their time and effort, that you can achieve things in this career that you wouldn't in any other career. You can travel the world, you can experience so many different things, and yet if we're not the ones that are owning that narrative and putting that out there, like, listen, you want to understand your career trajectory within your environment. Totally get that. You want to know where your training materials are. You got that. Here's your job description. Here's your skill set. Here's skill tests. You know, the associates that we have now and those that want to come into the industry, they're telling us what we should be providing them. And yet many of us are like, we don't really give a shit. You know, you're either on my bus or you're out walking. And they're like, okay. Like, they're going to walk out in the middle of a Saturday night and never come and never bat an eye about it. They're not going to feel bad or like, whereas probably when I was coming up, I probably had a false sense of loyalty to some employers where, you know, I would never think about walking out because I always thought I could change the situation, you know, make it, improve it through my own force of will or personality. And the reality is that doesn't really work when you have an owner who's just, right. No, exactly.
That is an incredible message, Adam. And I love that you shared that, because it's totally true. It's like kids today are much more astute and more aware of culture and interactions between people. You know, we grew up in a world where you kept your head down, your mouth shut, and you did the work. And I attribute that to the post-World War II management mentality of a top-down management structure. Now, in the military, it works, and it has a reason, because it keeps people alive.
Right.
But you know, the work world is not about keeping alive; it's about doing a good job and having a full life, right?
Right.
And so, culture is very important to up and coming people, and it should have been important to all of us all along. But we just didn't think that way, and you know, shame on us. I mean. So, you know, I love the attitude, you know, what you're talking about earlier, and what we were talking about, how we blame the young people on things. Oh, you know, they're too young. I don't want. No, dude, you're just too old, or you're just too stubborn, or your ego's in the way, or you're not listening, you're not paying attention, and you're not a lifelong learner.
Right. This may be a
distinction.
I couldn't agree more. And that lifelong learning is really a critical realization, because I remember leaving high school and thinking, yeah, I'll probably never use math again.
Right. Yeah. Good example. Right. Brilliant. Yeah, exactly.
And, and it's only in hindsight that I think, and this is going to be, you know, some folks won't have a reference to this, but GE, which was one of the largest corporations in the world, had a legendary CEO by the name of Jack Welch, who was lionized in the press. Everybody thought that he was the greatest thing since sliced bread, because he made a lot of profit, and shareholders were really, really happy. However, in looking under the cover, like pulling up the bonnet or the hood of the car to look at the engine, it was a shit show inside, because he was kind of like that top down. And if you didn't produce to a certain degree, or like, he had all kinds of weird metrics that he would choose and basically drop off the bottom 25% performing of the entire corporation. And he was outsourcing a bunch of stuff. So there was a bunch of stuff that happened under Jack Welch's reign that I think a lot of business owners thought, like, yeah, that's the way to do it.
That's right.
Right. And it's only in retrospect that people realize, you know, just what a traumatic experience it was, not only for the people that worked and then lost their jobs, but also for that corporate culture, because after he left, you know, it was horrible. And so, you know, he didn't end up being so lionized, but I think that's kind of speaks to where everybody's head was at in that post-war period of like, yep, you're gonna do as I say and not as I do, and as long as the shareholder's okay, the profit at any motive, or the profit at any cost motivation, to me, is really what fucked this whole thing up.
Well, and there's no doubt about it. And like, look, I mean, I know we're talking to a lot of people here, and I'm certainly not here to offend anybody or anything. But the fact of the matter is, stockholders, yes, they deserve a return on their investment.
They certainly do
about it, but not at the expense of damaging the business with a sour culture where you can't hire people or retain people, and it's not a sustainable model.
Correct.
We have to understand our biggest problem, I think, in business today is we think in quarterly dividends rather than a 5-year plan. And honest to God, Adam, this has bothered me since I was a young kid. It's just sort of like, I get the investor mentality, and I think it's healthy, and I think it's good. But if it's at the detriment of the frontline staff and the people that actually make that business and are actually, we talked about brand standards before, or you're a brand ambassador, that frontline employee is every much part of that business as the dude that finances it.
Without a doubt.
And as a matter of fact, I would argue all day long that person's even more important than you are, Mr. Investor.
Yep.
And so I think we just have to get real about, what happens in our operations, whether food service or manufacturing. I mean, we can go on and on, but where you have tasks that have to be done on a daily basis, we call that the deskless workforce.
Yeah, I love
that. By the way,
designation.
Did you know that 80% of the workforce is deskless? Think about that.
That's very interesting.
So that means you're not walking around with a laptop on you. You're not, it's like your job is to be on your feet and do work, or be in that van going to go fix the Maytag dryer at somebody's house, or, whatever. 80% of the workforce. So we have to address this issue. We don't have technical high schools anymore, or not like we used to. I mean, when I was in high school, I did everything from auto mechanics to metal shop to wood shop. Am I good at any of them? No. But can I talk about it? Have I done stuff? Am I an electrician? No, I'm not. But do I understand it? Well, sure I do. And guess what? If you run a restaurant or a hotel, guess what's there? All these things that we're talking about, you need to understand. It doesn't mean you have to be expert, but we're not training people. We're not making that information readily available. There's such a shortage of deskless workforce, particularly in the trades, whether you want to say chefs, electricians, plumbers, contractors, whatever you want to talk about, where you're using your hands and you're in a deskless environment. There's such a lack of it because we pivoted so hard to college, and we're under this misconception that the only way to make it in this world is through college. And we just don't, it's just a fallacy. Now, that does not mean negating education. I want to be very, very clear about that. Because you can be a 22-year-old person in an apprenticeship program as a plumber, and by the time you're 25 years old, you can be making $100,000 a year.
Exactly.
And that's not even an exaggeration.
Yep.
So, apprenticeship, train. You got to learn, find what you like to do and just stick with it.
Well, and the thing about mentorship is also having somebody who sees the greatness in you before you actually do.
That's
right.
Exactly
And will continue to push you or challenge you.
Yeah.
And Greg, I know we could probably talk about this for another 2.5 hours, but I want to respect your time and say thank you very much for joining us. And if there's anybody out there that would like to learn more about Pineapple Express, or perhaps get on their mailing list, signing up for their newsletter,
thank you, brother. Yeah.
How would they?
Sure. Well, first of all, we're not Pineapple Express. I support Pineapple Express, but that's okay. But it's all good. PineappleAcademy.com.
That was that neuron in my brain that crossed over from movies to education.
Don't worry.
So I'm sorry, say it again, pineappleacademy.com.
Pineappleacademy.com. We have a presence on LinkedIn. We have a presence on YouTube, Instagram, or on social media. And so, we have a lot of free content. Again, our job is to support and provide education. We want everybody to be lifelong learners, and we want to bring that information to anybody who wants to have it. it really is as simple as that. We're just trying to prepare the workforce so they can do their job and be effective, and hopefully give them some career advantages over their coworkers, so that they can advance and move up. That's what this is all about.
George, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I look forward to catching up to you soon.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much.